Be honest, does it feel like life is getting harder, even when you're doing everything right? Same job, same effort, same you. But somehow, groceries hit harder, rent feels like a punishment, saving feels pointless, and the future feels weirdly fragile. And what's creepy is there was no announcement. No one stood at a podium and said, "Hey everyone, welcome to the new era where normal stuff costs double." It just happened. Here's the truth most people avoid saying out loud. This isn't a temporary rough patch, it's a shift. We're leaving the era where life was supported by cheap stability, cheap money, cheap debt, cheap assumptions. And once that era ends, the system doesn't bounce back, it tightens. So in this video, I'm going to show you why life is getting harder in ways that feel personal, when the cause is structural. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. For a long time, we were sold a deal. Work hard, play by the rules, and over time, life gets easier. Your paycheck climbs, your savings mean something. A home becomes realistic. The future becomes kind of predictable. And for a while, that deal actually worked. From roughly the 1980s through the 2010s, a lot of countries lived inside a strange golden zone, what I call cheap stability. It wasn't perfect, but it had a feeling. If something broke, it would be fixed. Stocks crashed, rates got cut, banks panicked, liquidity showed up. A recession hit, stimulus arrived, and after the pain, the system reset. People built their entire identity around that world. The problem is, that world wasn't normal. It was a special moment, and it depended on conditions that are fading fast. Here's the part nobody likes to hear. A lot of what felt like progress was actually the system running on emergency tools for decades. When growth slowed, the solution was almost always lower rates, cheaper debt, more borrowing, more money in the system, and we'll deal with consequences later. And for a long time, consequences really did feel later. But now, later arrived. Debt is huge. Populations are aging. Energy is less cheap. Supply chains are shakier. And inflation doesn't vanish on command. So every fix now creates a new fracture. Raise rates to fight inflation, and you crack housing, jobs, and debt. Print money to calm markets, and you melt purchasing power. Cut spending to stabilize budgets, and voters revolt. The system isn't broken in one place, it's strained everywhere. Let's make it personal. You might even be earning more than a few years ago, but it doesn't feel like it. Because money doesn't just lose value in headlines, it loses value in your habits. You start doing weird math in your head. Can I still afford what I used to afford? You stop thinking in dollars and start thinking in trade-offs. Inflation isn't just prices rising, it's the slow destruction of certainty. Saving feels less rewarding, planning feels riskier, and stable routines start feeling fragile. And once the average person loses trust in money, even a little, everything gets tense. Because money is supposed to be the boring part of life. When it stops being boring, the whole system feels unstable. Let's make it personal. You might even be earning more than a few years ago, but it doesn't feel like it. Because money doesn't just lose value in headlines, it loses value in your habits. You start doing weird math in your head. Can I still afford what I used to afford? You stop thinking in dollars and start thinking in trade-offs. Inflation isn't just prices rising, it's the slow destruction of certainty. Saving feels less rewarding, planning feels riskier, and stable routines start feeling fragile. And once the average person loses trust in money, even a little, everything gets tense. Because money is supposed to be the boring part of life. When it stops being boring, the whole system feels unstable.
If you want the clearest proof the old normal is gone, look at housing.
For years, cheap rates made expensive homes feel manageable. Not because homes got more affordable, but because the monthly payment could be kept artificially low. Then, rates jumped, and suddenly, prices stayed high, payments exploded, supply stayed tight, and wages didn't catch up. That's how you get a world where the same apartment costs more while offering you less. Housing didn't just get expensive, it became a wall. And when shelter becomes a wall, society gets angry fast. This is where people get emotionally stuck, because the script in your head is still running. Work hard, level up, and life opens. But the world is quietly running a new script. Work hard and maintain. That's why so many people feel exhausted without being lazy. They're not failing. They're living through a systems shift while still judging themselves by the old rules. And that creates the most toxic feeling of all. I'm doing everything right, so why does it feel wrong? A lot of people still think if the right leaders showed up, this would be fixed. But governments are trapped in a math problem. They're trapped by massive debt, aging voters, expensive promises, fragile markets, and global competition. If they raise rates, something breaks. If they cut spending, they lose elections. If they print, they feed inflation. So what do? They manage expectations. They rename problems. They stretch timelines. They hope the old world returns. And this is the uncomfortable part. They don't have a reset button anymore. What makes this era different is that it's not just one country. It's not just one bad government. It's not just one crisis. It's the same feeling everywhere. Because the model was global. Cheap money was global. Debt expansion was global. Asset inflation was global. And the fantasy of permanent growth was global. So now the stress test is global too. That's why you can't just point to one villain and feel relieved. This isn't a glitch. It's a system reaching its limits. Here's something nobody tracks in official stats: the emotional cost. When life becomes unstable, people don't just lose money, they lose mental space. Planning feels pointless, optimism feels risky, big goals start sounding naive. So people shrink their dreams. And when millions of people shrink their dreams at the same time, a society changes. It becomes more cautious, more resentful, more tense, more extreme. That's not a cultural shift. That's economic pressure turning into psychology. Here's the punchline. The old world wasn't stable because we were smarter. It was stable because conditions were unusually favorable. And those conditions are fading. Debt is too large. Demographics are worse. Energy is less cheap. Geopolitical friction is higher, and inflation changed the rules. So the question isn't, how do we go back? The question is, how do we operate in a tighter era? Because the era of easy promises is over, and the system doesn't get easier, it gets more constrained. Now, this isn't hopeless. Humans adapt, always. But adaptation won't look like nostalgia. It will look like flexibility over certainty, skills over credentials, resilience over comfort, and systems thinking over vibes. The people who do best won't be the ones who predict everything perfectly. They'll be the ones who understand why the pressure exists and stop being surprised by it. So here's the real question. Not, how do I get lucky? Not, when does it go back? But what's actually changing, and what does that force me to change? Because denial is expensive. And the sooner you stop waiting for the old normal, the sooner you start making moves that work in the new one. And that shift from confusion to clarity is where people get their power back. Life isn't getting harder because you personally failed. It's getting harder because the system that made things feel easy ran out of room. Cheap stability was never permanent. It just lasted long enough that people mistook it for reality. Now we're entering a tighter era, less comfortable, more unpredictable, and more honest. And here's the final twist. The people who understand this early will live a completely different decade than the people who keep waiting for normal to return. So, do you think this discomfort is a temporary adjustment or the new baseline? Because your answer to that question changes how you live.